Retro.
Are you an aspiring Jedi, or do you dabble with the dark side of the Force?
Regardless of whether you fancy yourself a defender of the light or an aspiring Sith Lord, you're going to need a lightsaber.
Podcast Stardust is pleased to partner with Saber Masters, the creators of high-quality, durable, and affordable lightsabers.
Saber Masters is preparing to launch the Ultimate Lightsaber 2.0, and right now you can get 2 for the price of 1.
So, check out the link in our show notes and go get your Ultimate Lightsabers from Saber Masters.
And don't forget to use our referral code STARDUST to save $10 at checkout.
And each purchase using our referral code helps support Podcast Stardust.
Hey, this is Lauren Mary Kim, and I'm the stunt double for Ahsoka Tano in Clone Wars and the armorer in The Mandalorian. You're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. This is the way.
You found it. This is Podcast Stardust, the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And we have another episode of The Bad Batch to discuss this episode. But before we do that, Jay can remind everybody where we can be found around the internet.
Of course, Dennis. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and X, conveniently at Podcast Stardust.
All right, the digital line. The signal is boosted to maximum output. The shield is down, and we are now broadcasting to the galaxy. This is our full spoiler discussion of The Bad Batch, Episode 9 from Season 3, which is called The Harbinger. And I'm going to say it one more time. This is a full spoiler discussion, so if you haven't seen it, hit pause, come back when you've had a chance to do so. So, Jay, you want to go ahead and give us the summary for this one?
Yeah, because there's some really exciting surprises in this one for sure. The Bad Batch are on Pabu and have been waiting for news from Fennec about their M-count inquiry when Omega makes a startling discovery in a cave. The former Sith assassin Asajj Ventress has come to Pabu after Fennec Shan reached out to her. She has an answer about M-counts. Those that have a high M-count are capable of wielding the Force like the Jedi. Despite the reluctance of the Bad Batch and an ensuing fight, Asajj puts Omega through some tests to determine her potential count. The final test finds them on open water when they are attacked by a large sea creature. After Asajj subdues the creature, she tells Omega that she doesn't believe she has a high count. Crosshair, however, thinks she was lying.
So there we go. We've been wondering when we were going to see Asajj Ventress, because of course we got her in the Season 3 trailer, and now here she is. What did you think about this one overall, Jay?
Yeah, so she was in fact the contact that Fennec was talking about last week. So we were hypothesizing, who could that be? Well, here she is. So excited. You know, of course, I love Asajj Ventress, always have. And I'm still a little, I don't even know what the word is, but I'm still a little wary about the fact of how they brought her back. I understand how it happened because, kind of jumping ahead, she said, I have a few lives left, which I thought was a really cool nod. But, you know, it's one of those things that I wept openly at the end of Dark Disciple. And just like we've been getting in the High Republic, you know, it's no one's death is sacred. And it doesn't mean as much, but I just love having Asajj back, which makes me happy. So I'm very torn by that, as you can tell. But excellent episode. Of course, we knew what the M count was, and it wasn't being said for the longest time. And now we finally have the answer that it is, in fact, the midichlorians. And Asajj said it herself. So I loved the action in this one. I loved how calm Asajj was through this whole thing, which is super cool to see. And the camaraderie between the brothers and the Bad Batch and the way that they interacted with Asajj and with each other was pretty cool. So a lot to break down. I know I said a lot there. But what about you? How did you feel about the whole thing?
I liked it. I am not as high on it as you are. So let me see if I can put all my thoughts into words here on this, which of course is a podcast, so I should be able to do that.
Mhm.
First off, great to see Asajj again. I think I was hoping for maybe a little bit more of a dramatic return when it came
Mhm,
down to it, because that's the impression I got from the trailer with the way she
mhm,
was revealed. It's like, I wasn't planning on killing you, but you're making it very tempting. That line that we got, which was just so cool and so expertly delivered in this episode. But she just kind of walked out of the shadows in this one
mhm,
and
mhm,
grabbed Omega's arm and then brought her out of the cave. It was just fine. I like that she was the conduit for imparting this knowledge onto the Bad Batch, because they're clones, they're familiar with the Jedi, they've fought with Anakin Skywalker, or alongside, to be more precise, Anakin Skywalker in the past, and they are keenly aware of what the Jedi can do. And I like the fact that they were aware of who she was, or they were suspicious, and they confirmed that she was in fact Asajj Ventress. And I'm glad it wasn't just oh, you've clearly turned over a brand new leaf. Come on over. They
mhm.
they were very weary and leery of her, I should say. And so, they ended up having that fight, which was cool. I'm with you though. It's the way she returned without any type of an explanation. I don't want a PowerPoint presentation on how Asajj returned. I don't want a Wikipedia page, or a Wikipedia page in this case, on how she necessarily returned. However, something more than what we got, because I'm not getting it, how it is that she returned. I mean, that little line at the end about, a few more lives, or whatever she said, it is a nod to Dark Disciple, that she
Mhm.
apparently had passed away, but it doesn't really present anything. And on top of that, when this news broke before the season started, and boy, I can't think of the showrunners' names off the Jennifer Corbett and, is it Bradrow? Anyway, they did that interview and said that they were thoughtful about this, that they are honoring the canon, they're aware of what happened with her in Dark Disciple, and they've come up with a way for her to return. Not necessarily everything was going to be presented in this. Well, none of it was presented in this.
Right.
And that kind of bothers me about this. And I'm exactly with you. It's like, we talked about this with what do they call them? The CX clones, I think is what they're calling, the ones that were, they're the shadows, we got just a
Mhm.
couple episodes ago. And we're speculating that second one might have been tech based off the dialogue. I'm hoping it's not. And we had this conversation then. It's like, I don't want you to kill characters, just undo the death and get
Right.
because it cheapens that move every time that happens. And if there is a really cool way that makes canonical sense, then fantastic. And I'm with you. I mean, I love the character, but she had a rather noble death when it came down to it. And now we've taken that away without
Mhm,
any type of explanation of how she's here. And so at the moment, I'm not particularly good with that.
mhm.
And I don't know that we're going to see Asajj again this in the Bad Batch. This season's it. And so we'll be looking for that answer elsewhere. Well, I don't want it hanging out there like that. That's kind of a cheap move down
No,
there.
I agree.
So, anyways,
Mhm,
that's my feeling on the thing. And like I said, I kind of just wanted a bit more of a dramatic return for her, to see her. The fight that she had with a Bad Batch was cool. I like that,
mhm.
but at the end, she was a messenger, and she's not all that important to the overall story when it comes down to it. I mean,
Mhm,
they could have picked any of a dozen other characters to do this.
mhm.
So anyway,
No, that's fair.
so I hope at some point it's explained to us why it was so important that it had to be her, and they made this decision that they did.
Mhm. Yes, and I agree with a lot of the things that you just said, and you're right, it was Brad Rao because he came
Mhm.
out and said, "I remember that any of the new storytelling with Ventress was going to align with the events of Dark Disciple." And I know I've talked to a couple of my friends who are very much into the Night Sister lore,
Mhm.
and one of them actually said that it had to do with the waters of life that was on Dathomir, and that's where she was laid to rest, quote unquote, with Dark Disciple. And I guess we should say, for those of you that haven't read Dark Disciple,
Yeah. Spoiler.
sorry.
Blew past those.
Whoops. But yeah, no, I understand what you're saying about it could have really been anyone. And the fact that, if you didn't have a lot of history with Asajj Ventress before Bad Batch, which, I mean, I'm kind of assuming that most of the people that watch Bad Batch know who Asajj is and what her role has been
Mhm.
throughout the canon. But perhaps there are some that don't. But yeah, so I agree with you on that. That it was her presence is kind of like, okay, why her? Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. So again, I'm really hoping that in a couple weeks we're going, oh, this was a perfect decision to make. We just need to be patient.
Mhm.
But this is something that we've been waiting for what, 6 weeks,
Oh yeah.
or since the season started, and even longer since we got that trailer. And I don't know. I just kind of wish, for the way that she was going to be revealed, I kind of wish they had just left that out of the trailer, and let the reveal be here, and then let us all discuss it now, and then have all that stuff show up on StarWars.com with this answer is out there and it's coming. We just can't tell you how yet. What
Yeah.
I think would have been maybe the better way of going. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that, and I could be convinced either way. But just Mm, yeah, that's one of the things I want to know about this.
Mhm.
And so, okay, well, we spent a lot of time talking about that. Let's talk about some of the stuff that goes on here. So, the episode starts. They are still eagerly awaiting the return of or this information from Fennec so they can meet with whoever is going to have that information. And we got Crosshair and Wrecker working on that boat. And at the end, the fisherwoman, thanks Crosshair, and Wrecker immediately teases like, "Oh, someone's made a new friend." So, um, you kind of mentioned this earlier, but there is a lot more camaraderie with Crosshair in this episode than what we've seen before. It seems like and this is one of the strengths, is that they've suddenly been subtly, not suddenly, subtly been repairing the relationship amongst the members of the Bad Batch, without them having to be like super explicit about that. And I kind of like that.
No, I agree. And there really hasn't been a whole lot of time, I'm assuming too, because they just left Fennec not too long ago. But obviously there's been some things that have happened that have made that camaraderie a little bit stronger. And I think a lot of it too is just the fact that even just this last mission that they had together kind of helped to rekindle that a little bit as well. And even somewhat in a new way. It's
Mhm.
it's kind of evolved.
Yeah, yeah. But Crosshair kind of takes it in stride without as
He does.
much sighing and grunting, and like just the put upon routine that he usually goes through in this one.
Mhm.
And again, the biggest hang up in the group has been between Hunter and Crosshair, but still, just kind of seeing that ease of the relationship between Wrecker and Crosshair here. And then Hunter just walks out and is like talking to both of them, as opposed to like pulling Hunter or pulling Wrecker to the side.
Mhm.
So anyways, that was just something I noted there. Okay, so Omega goes down on the beach playing with Batcher, and then they go in the cave, they discover the ship, and then we get our reveal of Asajj Ventress. And a lot of interesting things happen in the conversation that they have with her. And she points out that it's reckless to inquire about M counts. It attracts the wrong type of attention. And this is, it's interesting that it's something that is getting around. Now, of course, we found out in the last episode that I think Fee called them class 1 bounty hunters were getting these targets for the Empire to bring in people with high M counts
Mhm.
here. And Asajj Ventress knows about this. We know from the Clone Wars that she did work as a bounty hunter for a while. Does this mean she's taking bounties again? Or how did you interpret all this?
Okay, I'm glad that you brought that up because I was wondering that as well. And I don't know if it's kind of she's working with Fennec and maybe, but Fennec would have been able to tell them if she was the class 1 bounty hunter, but maybe she's not revealing that because she's just having, Asajj kind of working behind the scenes for her. But
Mhm.
yeah, that's a really great question.
Yeah, I'm a little curious. I mean, I can see why Finnick just wouldn't blurt out who her contact was, because
Right.
that's
Yeah.
privileged information and you don't want to burn an asset if she's not interested in doing something. But she did turn over to Asajj Ventress. So, okay, it was interesting that those two knew each other and that thing. But for me, it's just like, if it's these priority 1 bounty hunters that are getting these missions,
Mhm.
and that's the connection we got. It just made me wonder. It was like, well, Asajj is in this episode talking about how dangerous the Empire is, and she clearly doesn't want anything to do with them, but she knows all about it. Now, we could probably write off some of this the fact that she has a high M count, which was very apparent in this episode because she
Mhm.
explains shortly thereafter this, after they get the information that M counts are something in the blood. Those with high M counts are more capable of wielding the Force, and it's not your blood by itself that makes you a Jedi. You have to train for that. And Asajj then goes on to say that she's never known a clone with a high count, but they bred millions of you guys, they being
Mhm.
Kaminoans, so she assumes it's potentially possible. I think I've said this before, but I'm really getting the feeling that Omega is not the unaltered clone that we've been told she is. That, that she's either a clone of somebody else or she was Nala Se's secret experiment in the lab.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sitting here thinking about all the ways that this could potentially go.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of going back to the class one bounty hunter thing that you were talking about too. And part of my head canon is that Quinlan Voss, is out there and that we know that he was probably, it hasn't been confirmed, but we've speculated that he's been one of the founding members of the Path,
Mm-hmm.
and that maybe Asajj is doing almost like a double duty kind of a thing, like a double agent, where she's acting like she's a class one bounty hunter, but she's actually trying to find these high M counts to protect them. You
Yeah,
know
I
what I
mean, I
mean?
suppose that's possible. The thing that gets in the way of that interpretation for me is that she's a known entity for the Empire.
Mhm.
And I would think that anytime she showed up, she'd have to present some sort of a chain code or something like that. They'd know who she is.
Mhm. That's true. Mhm.
And so, that's what gets in the way of all this for me. So I'm just a little curious what she's doing in the background, which is fine. It's fine to have some intrigue on here. And that's a little bit of a different thing than how did she come back? Because she was dead the last time we saw her. And so anyway, there's that. But I loved Omega in this scene. She basically, Asajj says that she's not going to tell them until she finds out what they want to know. And then Omega says, well, I have this friend that, that the
Yeah.
Empire's after. And then after Asajj puts out the information about Jedi, she's like, I'm a Jedi. and so, and so she just completely flubs that. And then, Asajj is ready to walk away. And Omega says, basically stops her, says, I need to know what I am.
Mhm.
And Asajj is reluctant. She's like, just remember you asked for this.
Yeah.
And so, it's just like one of these things that, and this will kind of come up again at the end of the episode, but this is one of the things that once you know, you can't unknow.
Mhm.
And what are you going to do with that knowledge? What did you think about the tests that Asajj puts Omega through? The first one is the standing on the slippery rock with one leg, eyes closed, arms spread akimbo. And then the second one, which was to get up to that tree and get the white blossom and get back down before the sunset. Let's go before kind of handle the third one by itself. What did you think of those first two tests?
Well, the first one was very Karate Kid to me,
Oh, I
and
hadn't thought
and
about that.
and I was thinking, okay, is she just trying to get her to, kind of unlearn what she has learned kind of thing and, let go of, the obvious and to try to go for the unobvious sort of a thing. I think the second one was just to get her out of there so she could talk to the Bad Batch a little bit about what the heck was going on without her being around and kind of giving her an excuse to, get her out of the room kind of thing. So, but, getting back to what you were saying too about if Omega really is not the unaltered clone that we thought that she was, the way that Asajj was putting her through these tests, though, I feel like she must have sensed something in her, but it was kind of silly. It was kind of like, what are you doing? Yeah, like what does this have to do with anything?
Yeah. So as we're talking this out, a couple things occurred to me. One, Qui-Gon suspected Anakin of being force sensitive and took a blood sample and had it analyzed and figured out, oh, midi-chlorian counts are off the charts. That's what Obi-Wan told
Mhm.
him back in the
That's what
Phantom
I was
Menace.
expecting. Mhm.
Yeah. And so clearly, Asajj doesn't have access to this technology, and she just can't tell. Which it was an old Legends thing where like Jedi could kind of sense each other's power and the like,
Mhm.
and sense the dark side and dark side users. That doesn't seem to be as much of a thing here in canon right now because she has no way of determining if Omega's got this potential than otherwise trying to get her to like draw on the Force and feel the Force, which I completely get the first one, which was and it's kind of influenced by the last one, which is, don't try and keep your balance. Just, let the Force reach out instead of you, was what she was
Mhm.
going for there. And you're absolutely right. The second one was to get rid of her for a minute while the Bad Batch and her had their discussion, which went south very quickly.
Mhm.
And so, but yeah, and I know where I was going with that. If Asajj doesn't have a way of conveniently being able to tell someone's got a high M count, then I'm guessing she really can't be a bounty hunter out there bringing in high M count targets unless they're already identified for her.
Mhm. Right.
Because that, how's she going to, she's not going to line up all these people, stand on one leg on this slippery rock that I just
Yeah,
have to bring with
exactly.
me. And yeah.
Let go of your conscious mind. I don't even know what that means. That was the cutest thing too. I love that from Omega.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
like
know
that
what that
too.
means. But yeah, as you're talking about that too, and the ability of Jedi to be able to suspect or feel or sense another person's force strength. I mean, we knew that Sidious could do that. He's, oh, the force is strong in you. But he was also extremely strong in the force, and he was Sidious. So, so to that extent, I don't know what ability Asajj would have. And
Mhm.
with that. So you're right. Yeah. And you would think that she would have to have that target identified already, not figure out if they are a target.
Right. And, we've talked about this in the past. I think a lot of times Sidious and Vader could like sense the hate in people
Mhm.
and as much as anything. And I think you have to be particularly Brian powerful because none of the Jedi knew that Palpatine was Sidious throughout
Mhm.
the prequels.
Mhm.
And, that's about as powerful as it gets when it comes
Mhm.
to someone that can use the Force there. So we get this showdown between Asajj and on the one side, Hunter, Wrecker, and Crosshair on the other. And as I said earlier, I was pleased to see that they were wary of her, that this is a known war criminal. They didn't mince words, that she done horrible things. And she doesn't even try to seek forgiveness about that, other to say that times
Mhm.
have changed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and the galaxy changes with it, which I really, like that's one of the things that we've talked about on a number of different occasions, that just because you get redemption doesn't mean you get forgiveness. And when we're talking about the Return of the Jedi Infinity things, one of the things that wrote us the wrong way at the end of that was that Darth Vader just shows up in white armor and is now going to help them hunt down Palpatine, and all's forgiven. And no, not everything's forgiven here. This was someone
Mhm.
who, she was an assassin, and they had every right not to trust her. And she was wise enough not to know that she just can't say something like "trust me."
Right. Yeah,
She
exactly.
had to demonstrate to them that she had their lives in her hand, in the palm of her hand, and yet she didn't kill them.
Mhm. And that's one of the things that led me to the feeling that she's so much more calm now, that
Mhm.
she is so much more balanced. And, the old Asajj would have had some sort of tongue in cheek kind of smart remark. And yes, she still has her wit and she still has that fun little, savvy side to her and kind of stippy side to her. But she really was a lot more measured in her responses. And she just seemed so much more like, mature, in a lot of ways.
Mhm. But I loved the way that Omega responded to her, the next day when she's gonna go out on the boat with Asajj. Asajj says something like, "Surprised you showed up." And, Omega is very good at reasoning these things out. She's like, "You could have killed us if you wanted to, but you
Mhm.
didn't," which leads me believe that you're trying to help us. Oh, she says, "And I think you like us." And
Yes.
she's very good at reading people. She was the
Uh-huh.
only one that was right about Crosshair all along when everyone
Mhm.
wanted to give up. And she points that out to Crosshair. It's like, "I never gave up on you." And because they had that meeting in the Marauder right before
Yeah.
that. And So, you know, and I could see like in a confrontation, if it ever came to it, like Omega versus Sidious, you know, him saying something like, you know, your faith in people will be is your weakness,
Yes.
you know. And but I think she's a good judge of character for the most part,
Mhm.
because I can't think of too many instances where she just got it all wrong. I mean, Fennec Shan was the first time they encountered was trying to take her back to Nala Se before she ended up leaving her. But I don't know. I think that's kind of Omega's superpower.
Mhm. Well, we said before that she's an empath, and
Yeah.
this just kinda goes to prove it again. She knows how to read a room, and she knows how to read people and the way that people interact with each other.
Yeah. I also liked it when they finally got on that boat. Asajj says to Omega, "Stop smiling. It's unsettling."
It's unsettling.
Like,
Yes, that's the old Asajj right there. That's what I meant by, like, she's still witty and she's still, yeah, that was great.
she and Crosshair have some personality traits in common.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. And speaking of Crosshair, I really like how he continues to be protective of Omega the way he's
Mhm.
been doing. You know, he's, you know, we talked about this before. He's that, you know, one more uncle for her.
Yep.
And he's just like, you know, Hunter and Wrecker and Echo, you know, are very eager to protect Omega and her future. You know, he's fallen completely in on that. And to the point where like he's openly disagreeing with Hunter. You know, he's yeah, they're keeping an eye on that boat. And this whole, you know, Hunter says like, you know, we promised Omega that we wouldn't interfere. When Rucker says that, you know, they should be out there with her. Oh, and I love the point where she looks back at them, like right at them while
Yeah.
using
"Oh, she know we're watching."
uh, freaked Wrecker out. And then, but
Oh,
Crosshair says to
yeah.
Hunter, it's like, you made that promise. I didn't. So,
Mhm. Indeed.
but then they get to the boat and Omega is not getting where trying to reach out and feel the force or whatever it is. Asajj hopes will happen. And for the record, it's really hard to switch back and forth between Asajj and Omega. I'm doing my best here, but I'm undoubtedly flubbed it at least once or twice along the way. But Asajj demonstrates what she wants her to do by reaching out to the sea life, and she pulls up those like jellyfish
Yeah, like
double ray type
bioluminescent.
thing
Yeah, they
thing.
look like little stingray kinda things, yep.
Yeah. And then they get chased off by this creature that alternately gets described in the descriptive audio and the closed captioning as a Leviathan and a Vrathian.
Mhm.
So take that for what it's worth. And the Bad Batch tries to shoot it with the Marauder, and then Omega calls them off, and then Asajj calms it through the Force, and they return to show. What did you think about that encounter?
Well, first of all, the whole reason that it started was because Omega was basically calling Asajj out and saying, "I don't see," basically like, "I don't see you doing this." And
Mhm.
so, of course, Asajj had to prove to her that, yes, this is why I'm kind of the authority right here, and I can tell because I can do these things. But the way that she did this, and she said, Omega said, "Did you call that sea creature?" And she said, "Not intentionally." But there were so many instances that, yes, Asajj did have to pull out her lightsaber, and she did have to cut the tentacles off this Wraithian to save Omega from drowning, but yet, you know, as Omega was trying to tell the batch, don't shoot, she's got this under control." And when Asajj reached out with the Force and calmed this creature, that's not your typical Asajj, you know what I
No.
mean? Like, if it was the dark side Asajj, she would have tried to use dark force magic or Night Sister magic even to kill this thing, but yet she didn't. And so that for me was kind of like, yes, this is light side Asajj, you know what I mean? And, that's for me, that was just like a really turning point thing in the story.
Yeah, it was. I'm not sure if I go so far as light side as a not Sith initiate Asajj.
Right.
When it
Yes.
comes down to it, you know, someone who's not always going to resort to violence and death to
Mhm.
resolve the problem here. The other thing that occurred to me, and what was the name of the creature on Dathomir that was in those waters that she sent Quinlan
Oh,
Voss after to get a scale from it?
Yeah, yeah. I don't remember what they were called.
and he ended up killing the thing.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if this creature was anything like that, but it vaguely reminded me of that thing. And so I wondered
Mhm.
if that was in the back of her mind, that this was
Ooh, I
something
like
like
that.
from home here. But yeah, so let's get to the final scene. They get back on shore, and Asajj basically tells Omega that from what she's seen, she doesn't believe she has a high M count. And then Omega's like, well, why are they after me? And Asajj's like, I don't know everything. I don't know what the Emperor's after you, but you guys aren't safe here. Not as safe as you think. It's in your best interest to leave. And Rucker kind of consoles Omega and ushers her off. And then Crosshair says, you're lying. And Asajj's response to that is that if Omega had that potential, then she'd have to be trained, which means she would have to leave you behind. And then she goes on to say, what you want is irrelevant. The Empire's after her, and they won't stop. If I were you to leave this place, you're not as safe as you think you are. And okay, that was an interesting move by Asajj, because I'm with Crosshair. I think she lied, that Omega did have something that Asajj was able to detect that indicated that she had a higher M count than she's letting her on. But Asajj decided that it was in Omega's best interest to stay with the Bad Batch for whatever reason.
Mhm.
And therefore, she told Omega that so that Omega's not trying to go after her for more training or putting herself in further danger. What's your
Mhm.
take?
No, I'm in total agreement with you on that one because I don't know what it was that Asajj could pull out as far as proving that Omega had any kind of an M count from those tests, but there must have been something. And, when she said she would have to be trained, it's almost like for a split second, I thought, ooh, by who? You?
Mhm.
Kind of, are you going to train her, Asajj? And then when she said, if I were you, I'd leave this place. You're not as safe as you think you are. I mean, right there, she's basically saying, you got to protect her and they're going to take her if you guys don't take her somewhere. So that was huge. I think that was huge.
What
Yeah.
if the follow-up series to The Bad Batch is Master Asajj and Padawan Omega?
Oh, wow. And, well, I could see maybe Path of the Light or something like that, where they could take this and run with the path, and how
Mhm.
that was created, and perhaps Omega is part of that as well.
Yeah, yeah. No, I don't know. I don't know what happens from here on out, but I think this episode very clearly suggests that Omega's got more to her than we led to believe, as we were talking about at the top of the episode. And whether it is that she's got force sensitivity or there's something about her genetic makeup that if you do manage to put midichlorians in there, through whatever cloning process you're doing, it can create a successful replication, I think is what they called it back earlier in the season. So anyway, we there's still some mysteries to be resolved with this season. We got 6 episodes left, a lot to do.
Mhm.
But
We
yeah,
do. And
yeah.
we still have the Empire's code name Mark Omega, which we
Mhm.
still don't know what that was because we know that was in the Empire's data vault on Scarif.
Yeah, and maybe it does, maybe it does not relate to this, but that name is suggestive.
Mhm.
So, any other final thoughts on this before we wrap it up?
Well, I did love the fact that when Asajj and Omega got back onto the Marauder and Crosshair was helping them on, he actually lent his hand to Asajj and she took it.
Mhm.
I thought that was really cool. That was just one little detail that I was like, "Oh, that's awesome," kind of thing. But no, I really enjoyed this episode a lot. But like you, there's still so many questions that need to be answered about Asajj and how she survived and where is this going to go from here. But yeah, overall, really good episode. What about you?
Yeah, I really like it. I think I like it a little bit better now that we've had a chance to discuss it. I'm still not ready to put this like in the solid A
Hmm.
category, maybe an A minus or somewhere around there if I were to grade it, which I don't typically do. But just because, again, I wanted to see more out of Asajj Ventress
Hmm.
and find out more about what she's been doing, get a few more. I didn't, like I said, I don't have to have it spelled out, but I would like to have a little bit more information about why it is that she's back here, and or something that would lead me to believe that I'm going to get that answer that's pointing me in the direction of that, that we are definitely going to see her again later this season. But she left at the end of this episode, so I don't know when we're going to get that information. They're
Mhm.
teasing us that it's out there somewhere, but we'll see.
Yeah.
So
I do have a question. What was the ship that she was in, Asajj?
I don't know. It was cool.
Because it wasn't her normal ship.
Yeah. Well, maybe she doesn't have
I was
access to that
curious.
any longer.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
which
not.
makes sense, but
Yeah.
I was just curious what kind of ship it was. I was almost thinking it's kinda like a B-wing almost, the way it was shaped,
Yeah, because
but
it was not symmetrical. The two
mhm,
wings. Each wing had the three blue engines on it, but the one wing was longer than the other one, and it curved up at the end. So yeah, I could see why
mhm,
you got that impression of it being
mhm,
like a B wing. And it's just the
yeah.
cockpit just didn't rotate. So
No, no, and her old one was what was that called?
I don't know.
Headhunter. Wasn't it a Headhunter? Wasn't that the name of the ship? I don't remember. Anyways, it was cool. I remember it
Yeah.
being cool.
Oh yeah, definitely so. All right, then. Well, then that will wrap up our discussion of this episode of The Bad Batch. Thank you all for joining it. We hope you'd enjoyed it. And if you did, then hey, if you haven't done so already, hit the subscribe button to this podcast and you'll get all of our discussions of the remaining episodes of The Bad Batch and then whatever comes next. And when we're not doing episode discussions, we are breaking down news and having other discussions about Star Wars, and those episodes come out 3 times a week. I'd like to remind you, you can find our entire catalog of shows over on retrozap.com, which is also home to a bunch of other great podcasts covering everything in the Greek culture, from the MCU and DC to Dune, Star Trek, and a whole lot more. We greatly appreciate our listener support. That usually comes in the way of 5-star ratings and reviews on whatever podcatcher it is that you're using, and social media. If you could share the show with your friends there, let them know about an episode that you particularly enjoyed. That is always great for helping us get new listeners to the show and spreading the word. So with those things having been said, Jay, I want to remind everybody what our social media contacts are and where else we can be found online.
Of course. As always, we are on Facebook, Instagram, and X at Podcast Stardust. And we do have a Pinterest page and our YouTube channel, and we're also on YouTube Music now. And just a really quick note, if anyone is out there using Google Podcasts, because I know I was for the longest time until I went to Spotify, after April 2nd, you will no longer be able to listen to podcasts in Google Podcasts. So you're going to need to transfer your subscriptions to your YouTube Music or some other service of your choice. So if you are downloading us on Google Podcasts, please make sure that you make that reconciliation so that you can continue to get us uninterrupted. And so again, we are on YouTube and YouTube Music, so you can hit us up there. And our Discord room, which is part of the RetroZap Discord server, we are over there in real time talking about all things Star Wars related to our episodes and just whatever comes up. And there's tons of other shows over there as well. So if you are into any kind of geek culture, you are bound to find a room to talk to with people in it, of course, not just the room. And then we also have a T Public store, and the link for that will be in our show notes. And we do have 7 different show logo designs available on all kinds of cool stuff. So head over there and check that out. And then we are still working with Saber Masters, which is an amazing lightsaber company. And right now we still have the 2-for-1 deal on the Ultimate Lightsaber 2.0 going on over there at Saber Masters. And you can get 2 for $199. Excellent lightsabers. We highly recommend them. And if you do happen to get something, make sure that you enter in the code Stardust at checkout and you will get an extra $10 off. And who wouldn't like an extra $10 off? And so, with that, Dennis, it's almost April. That means warp trails. So, fill
Mhm.
us in on all the good news.
Next week, Star Trek is back. Discovery returns. So my wife and I will be covering that on Warp Trails. And you can look for those episodes usually within a few days after the most recent episode of Discovery's aired. And if you want to get our thoughts on prior episodes of Discovery, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, and Picard, then just head over to zap.com and look for the Warp Trails page. Jay, what is going on with cosplay?
All right. Well, as usual, you can catch all the fun with my cosplay over on j.snips cosplay on Instagram. And I'm currently working very hard on my original concept Mandalorian, and I'm hoping to have that done by Fan Expo Cleveland on the 12th of April, which I will be there. And then I've got a bunch of other things planned for April as well. So hit up my stories and my feed to find out exactly where I will be. And May is already shaping up to be very fun as well. So May the 4th be with us all. And so I'll be having some details coming up on that very soon. And again, that's at j.snips cosplay.
All right, upcoming on the show on Monday, we have our look at recent Star Wars news. Some fun stuff going on there, so make sure you get that in the episode. And then on Wednesday, we are going to be discussing Defy the Storm, which was the most recent young adult novel in the High Republic. So, thanks for listening to episode 709 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great weekend, and until next time, may the Force be with you.